Welcome to this video series on emergency preparedness for historical records repositories by the Vermont Historical Records Program. The Vermont Historical Records Program is based at the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration and provides guidance and assistance to organizations with historical records. We can conduct on-site assessments, help connect organizations that want to collaborate on initiatives, and we can teach workshops. This video will be covering the very basics about how emergency management works so that you can communicate more clearly during a disaster. When you think of disasters, you may only think of a few types, but as you can see from this list, there may be some that you haven't thought of. Emergencies and disasters generally fall under three categories: natural disasters, which include things like storms, floods, extreme temperatures, earthquakes, and, of course, the one on everyone's mind, pandemic. There are disasters caused by human hands, which can be accidental or intentional, including things like cyber attacks, civil disorder, acts of violence and terrorism, hazardous material leaks, or infrastructure failure. The third category is what's considered everyday disasters, caused by natural or human-made disasters, such as a power outage after a storm or a structural fire after an act of arson. This table shows the natural hazards that rank highest for Vermont, as determined by the State Hazard Mitigation Plan in 2018. It's probably no surprise that the biggest hazards involve flooding, but it's interesting to see how low infectious disease outbreak ranked on the plan just 2 short years before the COVID-19 pandemic. The state updates its hazard mitigation plan every 5 years, and this table might look a little different at the next assessment. Please note that this table only includes natural disasters. There are 4 basic phases to the emergency management cycle, and these phases take place before, during, and after an emergency. You've already had a taste of the mitigation phase in the last slide. The mitigation phase are actions that are undertaken to eliminate threats or hazards, or at least to minimize the impact of them. It requires looking at the risks that your institution faces, understanding where you're vulnerable, and then taking steps to address those risks. If you know your building is in a floodplain, for example, you might mitigate the impact of flooding damage by moving records located in a basement to a higher floor. The way to understand your risks is to undertake a risk assessment, which you saw an example of in the State Hazard Mitigation Plan. Risk assessment will be covered in another video in this series. While the mitigation phase prevents future emergencies or ensures that their impact is lessened, the preparedness phase ensures that you are able to respond and recover from an emergency should it actually happen. These are all the actions taken to ready yourself in case a disaster arises. This is where a disaster plan comes in, and disaster plan writing will be covered in another video in this series. Just remember, you're already taking your first step to prepare just by watching this video today. The response phase is what happens during an actual emergency. These are the in-the-moment, immediate, and short-term steps you must take to react when a disaster happens. These are the steps such as calling first responders, notifying the first most appropriate staff member or volunteer, or evacuation of the building. This is the phase where steps are taken to ensure the safety of people and property, and is when your disaster plan gets called into action. The recovery phase is what happens after the emergency is over, and is the process by which operations are brought back to normal, to the extent that that's possible. This phase can take days, weeks, or months, depending on the severity of the disaster. This is the cleanup, the time when insurance claims are filed and other financial avenues are explored, and when collections are treated for damage. And what is learned through the recovery phase can inform what needs to be done to further mitigate potential emergencies. To use the earlier example, if some of your historical records are lost in a flood because they were stored in the basement, you would then know that any remaining items should be moved to a higher location to prevent flood damage in the future. Once you have moved those items, you have mitigated the risk of future flood damage to your records. Emergency management phases are an iterative practice that feed into each other and need to be revisited from time to time. Emergency management uses many acronyms and other terminology that can be confusing to those who aren't a part of that field. In order to best understand what's happening and to advocate for yourself in the event of a disaster, it's important to be able to speak the language and use the terms the way emergency managers do. Here are a few basic terms that can be useful when interacting with the world of emergency management. An incident is an event, accidentally or deliberately caused, that requires a response. Disasters and emergencies are types of incidents. An emergency is a serious and unexpected, often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. Emergencies are often localized, while a disaster is large scale or widespread, resulting in significant loss or damage. Or, the way the Conservation Center of Philadelphia puts it, a disaster is an emergency that has gotten out of control. A hazard is a natural, technological, or social phenomenon that poses a threat. It is the thing that causes the emergency if not mitigated. You deal with hazards by performing a risk assessment, the process of identifying the likelihood and potential impact of a threat. The Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, is the physical location where the coordination of resources and information takes place during a disaster response. Often, this is a temporary location. The Incident Command System, or ICS, is the model by which the disaster response often runs and the way the emergency operations centers operate. The ICS is a hierarchical structure that ensures who reports to who and keeps efforts streamlined and organized, which helps to reduce chaos, ensure the efficient use of resources, and keeps everyone involved safe. Finally, the damage assessment, different from the risk assessment, is the process of identifying and documenting the extent of physical damage a disaster has caused to buildings, collections, and your other property. This only happens after it's been deemed safe to enter the affected spaces, allowing recovery to begin. Now let's see what you've learned. If you'd like to test your knowledge, you can access a short quiz at the link shown here. And this covers the very basics of emergency management that are important to understand when preparing for emergencies. For more information about emergency preparedness, you can view the other training videos in this series or visit our resource library at the link on the screen. Thank you for watching.